Coming at you live with an open heart.
Hi, thank you for joining us on the first episode of the Coven Loven Podcast. And today, we're just talking. My name is Deanna.
I'm Rachel.
And we've been a part of a coven together for a few years. And it's one of the most nourishing things that I have ever had in my entire life.
Yeah, me too. It's been, like, when I think back to when I found the coven and the coven found me, it was the beginning of learning what unconditional love is.
Exactly.
And, like, learning how I desired and deserved to be held.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely nourishing.
Yeah. That is pretty much 100% exactly what I would say for me as well. And something else that I always say about the coven is, but this also is based in the unconditional love, is that having the unconditional love of the coven has opened up my world in like every other way. So like feeling your support and belief in me, like that's such a big thing. Is I feel like when I first started joining coven calls, in so many ways, I feel like I was in the space of like the unhealed inner child, but the fact that I could be that and be held and received with so much love, like brought so much healing to that inner child, and then has instilled like a confidence in me that has then allowed me to pursue dreams that were like lifelong dreams that I truly don't think I would have had the confidence to do otherwise, specifically speaking of full-time travel. Like that's the big one, really.
Wow, I thought you had full-time traveled before.
No, I had traveled, but not, and I had solo traveled. Like most of my travels have been solo travels, but not full-time.
Wow.
Like that came, the seed for my first stint of full-time travel was planted the first time I met you all in person.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we did a little plant medicine ceremony, and I was sitting on the front porch so the second time that we all met in person, we had a weekend at a retreat center in New England, and I was sitting on the porch with Ariana.
Okay.
And we were talking about, I mentioned Montana, and she was like, you should go to Montana. And I don't know how it came up, but it started with, we should go to Montana. And then it like shifted to, like, it just wasn't right for her at that time, you know? And then it shifted to, well, I'm going to go to Montana. And I drove around the perimeter of the country, and we were still having coven calls on Zoom at that time, which was very helpful because I was living out of my car. So like there was the essence of homelessness, which is really challenging.
Yeah.
And that unconditional love like carried me through that. I came back because I missed you guys so much, stayed for a while, and then went to Florida. Yeah. And then all of these activations happen like in the container of like coven spaces. Soon after you came to Florida, and I reconnected with Jess. So literally I had just been with you and Chris, and then I'm reconnecting with Jess, and an eclipse happened, and on the day of the solstice, I booked my tickets, the winter solstice that year, I booked my ticket to Greece.
Wow. Wow, I had no idea that that's when it was planted. It was when you and Ariana were sitting out there, and like we heard you giggling. We heard you two giggling. Oh. And we kept like hearing you two giggle, and we were like, the cackle corner. The cackle corner is out there.
Who were you sitting with, out of curiosity?
It was still like the same room, because I remember when you got up. Yeah,
I know what it was.
Yeah. So everybody was sitting, like everybody had stayed.
Yeah.
Because I think that's when it was, right? Like when you were like rolling I don't know if you want this on the podcast.
Yeah, it's fine.
You were rolling herbs and herbal smokable.
Yeah.
And then you two went out there.
Actually, that does... I feel called to draw attention to Ariana's ability to... And you and I have had this conversation before and associated it with Gemini energy, but the willingness to just stand up and be like, all right, I've had enough of this space and walk away.
Yep. I'm done peopling.
Yeah.
With this group.
I'd rather go people over there now.
Yeah.
I feel like that's very on topic for what we wanted to talk about as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I forgot we had a topic.
We did have a topic.
Oh my gosh.
The reason I didn't mention a topic is because I knew we were going to popcorn anyway.
I love, I just love how our conversations will fractal into so many areas and then come back. Keeps happening.
Yeah.
It's like a stand-up, in a stand-up comedy bit, at the end, the end will dovetail back to the original beginning of the joke, and then you're like, whoa, that, yeah, all right, full circle.
And what a beautiful metaphor for life, because that's exactly what has been coming up today, is all of the... I have no words even for it, all of the bits and pieces of everything that has happened that keeps leading in the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, I guess I will say what our topic was. So we wanted to talk about creating space for anything. The need to consistently clear out and create space for new things to come into our lives. How whenever we are holding on to things that aren't really working, it's not to use friendships as an example. It's not like I can just cling on to my friends that I kind of know I've outgrown them, but I'm just going to hold on until I make new ones. It's no, you're actually not going to meet the new friends until you clear out the space of the ones who aren't really working out anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that can be the scariest thing because you don't know that the new friends are on the other side.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. It just always seems to work that way. We've got to release the old to make space for the new. Mm. And I think that's what started this topic when you were should that be our topic? I think I was reflecting on that. I was realizing, does it always have to be that way? We always just have to be releasing to make space for what's trying to find us? We can't hold on to it. And with friends, it makes so much sense because if we're holding on to, let's say there's a group and the patterns have become redundant, it's just the same patterns and repeat, and it's always harder to be the first one to not vibe with those patterns anymore and to just be they don't resonate with me. Whether it's a group of friends who bond over trauma or bond over drinking or however that group of friends bonds. It could be bonding over taking jabs at each other and maybe we're just done with that. Mm-hmm. And being the first one that's just this no longer resonates. Mm-hmm. That can be so scary. And there's a really strong primal chord. If that's your tribe, of course it's going to be scary because we have an ancient primal wound that tells us if you leave the tribe, you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And it could really feel like that. And it takes a tremendous act of courage and resilience to be able to let a whole group of friends go because, as our cups say, it's not personal, it's vibrational. It really is vibrational. And if your vibe isn't resonating with a group, then it's okay to be on your own for a little while because your vibe truly does attract your tribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something that comes up in hearing you say that is the idea that, like, whatever spaces we're keeping ourselves around, like whatever spaces we're showing up to, we can only be within a certain vibrational resonance of that. So, like, if it's something in the case where, like, your friends are drinking and you're like, this is not it, but, like, you're still showing up to those spaces, like, that is a pretty low vibrational energy. Or there's no low and high. It's not hierarchical,
Dense.
but dense. Yeah. We'll say dense. That works.
Yeah.
But, like, that's very dense. Yeah. And so, like, if you're looking for friends who are showing up to Cacao Circle at 8 a.m. every Sunday morning, for example, that's a pretty big leap.
Yeah.
Like, that's like a quantum leap. And, of course, quantum leaps happen. However, most of the time, these things happen at a certain, it's like in the healing journey where everything happens at a tier. It's like, typically you're not jumping like 7 steps. You're usually going 1 or 2 at a time.
That's pretty much how I landed in the Coven. Was like, before then, my group of friends was either my coworkers, and we bonded through drinking and gossiping, or like my concert, like live music group of friends, and we bonded over drinking and drugs and those bands, and all were a lot of like escapism. The conversation never got too deep, never got like that into like the soul level, and around the same time that I lost all those friends, like, I also left my job and was kind of in my cave for a little while, and was also isolated because of an abusive relationship. But it kind of matched, like, that would be the time I would attract a relationship where isolation was part of the abuse. And that's when I found the Coven, and I was like praying for my new tribe. Like, I got into got super into numerology, which felt like more of a reacquaintance, because come to find out, years later, my great aunties were all numerologists and astrologists, so it was always there, and I finally gave myself the time and space to dive into just like witchy shit. Oh, can I say shit?
Yeah.
Okay. Witchy stuff, like setting my new moon intentions, watching how they unfold, like journaling every day, watching how those new moon intentions unfold when the zodiac's in that same, when the full moon's in that same zodiac, and practicing divination tools through oracle decks, just all these things that I probably would not have felt comfortable doing with previous groups of friends and my previous job. So I was doing that alone in my cave, and then that's when Emmy and I connected on Instagram, and she was like, I'm gathering some local witches for the equinox. And I was like, thank you. Like, the tribe, because it can be hard to have faith that your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yeah.
When you put your vibe out there, and that's the key, like, you gotta put your vibe out there.
Yeah.
You gotta do it.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're literally not going to recognize. Like, how would she have known that you were one of the witches that she wanted to gather if you weren't showing up as a witch?
Exactly. Just like you showing up mining, like crystal mining.
Yeah. Which was also with Emmy. So, have you guys had any... Emmy, the great connector of witches.
For real.
Had you had any conversations with her before that? Or was it just from seeing each other's posts?
Just from seeing each other's posts.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think maybe like a little back and forth. Just like, oh, I didn't know you were local. Like, I live in Massachusetts. And I was like, whoa. I don't know how we initially found each other. But man, was I grateful.
Yeah.
Like, and that was the first time. That was my first circle. Like, now every Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
wow.
It's just, that was my very first circle. Like,
yeah.
Other than maybe like camp when I was a kid, and like we would do like silly things in circle,
Yeah.
like call and response type things, or
Wow.
play duck duck goose. That was probably my first.
It's a little different type of circle.
Yeah. So duck duck goose would be fun.
Although it does say something about how no matter what point in our lives we're at as humans, we're always just drawn to sit in circles with each other.
Yeah.
However, I actually said this in a voice note to someone yesterday that they're feeling pretty like lost where they are and not knowing what the next step is. It's a fellow nomad who there gets to be a point, I think, in every nomad's journey, or at least every nomad who's doing a lot of self-reflection, which is like, what's the point? Because no matter what you do every day, it becomes mundane, even if it's seeing a new country, right? And experiencing all new things. And you get to the point where literally what is the point is what he expressed coming up. And I was sharing that me coming back to the US that's what was coming up for me. And I literally was losing my sense of purpose of why was I doing it. And he's in India right now. And what I said to him is I was basically trying to guide him to find a circle. I recommended Oroville, which is the facilitator of the circles that I frequent when I'm in Crete. She used to live in Oroville. And so I knew that if he was in that part of India, I mean, India is a big country, but I knew that if he was close enough to there, that I could reach out to her and I would be able to help direct him to something. But I also gave him like some of the keywords that I searched, because he could find that probably anywhere in India. And he's headed to Nepal. And I was like, you can definitely find that in Nepal. But when I was saying it, what came up for me, I was like, oh, what I would like give, would sound silly saying it like that, but like the feeling to experience being in a sacred circle again for the first time. And the reason that I point that out is because, like, I mean, we're always drawn to be in circle as humans, but a sacred, an intentional circle is like some of the greatest freaking magic that. And I feel like that's what we always want to share as a coven. That's the reason that I wanted to, took me a while to get around there. But as a coven, we've talked so much about how being in circle with each other has shifted all of our lives in really profound ways. And that's what we want to share is like, it doesn't have to be our circle. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to do it the way that we do it. But the act of coming together in intentional ceremony with like-minded people is like one of the most transformational things that I've ever experienced. Like, that is the closest thing that I have ever seen to earth magic. And saying closest doesn't even make sense because it is earth magic.
It is, yep.
It's like pure magic.
I mean, we witness it. And it goes back to what you were saying about space and like making space, like circle. I mean, it's a container. And when the facilitators of the circle are safe and calm and welcoming, inviting, warm, receptive, the container just gets so wide. And if you think about all the energies within it and how density tends to move, like water, it'll spread and expand to fit the container. So if the energy, if anyone's got density within and it's held in a really wide, safe container, it's gonna expand out. And that's why strong emotions come to the surface. And it does, like, it makes, like, we release so much through that process that it does make space for new insights, revelations. So it's not just like releasing old friends to attract a new tribe, it's also releasing stuck, stagnant stuff inside to make space for new wisdom, new insights. Maybe not new, but like maybe hidden.
Yeah.
But yeah, that first circle, I'm excited for him to have his first circle if he gets to have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is magical.
Mm-hmm.
It's intoxicating.
It is intoxicating. Even as you said that, I was thinking about how, I don't want to minimize the magic of community and the importance of community. We were just talking about this and we can go back there, but like for this conversation, but I almost feel like when you said like not just making space for a new tribe, like the tribe is symbolic of what is happening inside. Like we cannot, this goes back to the energetic resonance. Like we're not attracting things that are that far away from where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like energy attracts like energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're like internally approaching soul land, have you ever listened to the East Forest album, Ram Dass?
I don't think I've listened to the whole thing, but
there's one track called Soul Land, and he talks about like entering soul land and how you see souls. I feel like that's what happens, like when we start seeing our souls, and then we get to see other souls. But other souls also need to be at a point where their ego has made enough space for their souls. Well, I don't know. I feel like we can see the soul in everyone, whether or not our ego has made space. No, maybe not. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think you're so far away from that point that you're like, I don't remember what it's like to not see everyone in the purest form.
Coach training is so weird because it like rewires us to just see souls.
Yeah.
And like anything is like, I've got this like direct line into people's souls, and anything in the way is just a block. And it's just like my job to help them identify those blocks and challenge those blocks. So it's really hard for me to like remember, like, wait, because it is a remembrance, like returning back to your soul. You do remember, like, oh yeah, I remember when I did see the world more like this. Because when we were innocent kids and full of joy, like we did see a lot more wonder and had just more connection to the essence of life. And then we become older and trauma happens, and then like our space gets filled up with ego and fear, and then we love the ego. The ego, you're taking up more space than my soul, so we gotta release some of the ego's attachments to make space for the soul's everythingness and nothingness, the soul's perception.
Yeah. A few things that are coming up are, so one of them is that aspect of you, like your ability to do that. When I met the Coven, I was pretty, we're always on a spiritual journey, but I was pretty early on in my like deep excavation of my ego. That was really the beginning for me in terms of like what I would now consider like the shift of my entire world. And that aspect of you was something, first of all, so when I first met you guys, I don't know if I've ever said this to you or not. I was so like I feel like I was holding you on this like pedestal. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what humans should be. Like literally and I felt like I wanted to be like more like you, and the sense that like I felt like, but what's funny is that, and I now recognize is like so silly, but at the time I thought that meant that I have to be soft, like the way that you're really soft and gentle, like, and now I realize like that unconditional love and seeing everyone for their soul, that is the highest expression of interaction. But like, now I'm like, oh, but I do it in my way.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't mean that I have your energy, but I just like equated those two because you were the only person that I had ever truly seen. And actually my mom has a friend who's like that, and she's also very soft. So I was associating it with that like Piscean, she's also Pisces.
Oh.
I was associating it with this like very gentle Piscean like vibe. And then I was like, oh wait, like I can be I was gonna say fiery. I'm not super fiery, but I have like a lot of like, I don't know, like I feel like my energy is more like, it's louder. It's more, I don't know.
I feel like your energy, I feel like your energy is really grounded.
Okay.
Like that was my, like when I first met you, the way that you articulate and like just the way you express your, like who you are and your perception of the world comes across to me as really grounded. And like that's your energy for me, like, which in a way, like it might not be like soft and gentle, but it does feel, but it's inviting, you know. It's like, oh, come sit, you know.
Well, I think there's a certain softness to like being that open to love, even if like, I don't know, I think loud is kind of the, like, I feel like the way that I do things is just a little more like it's like do it for the plot. Like I always have to, like, I feel like everything should be big. Yeah. And like very earthly.
It's definitely earthly. Yeah. You're very earthly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's like comforting, and it's like home. There's like a sense of home and like, and also there's a level of enthusiasm that comes through you.
Enthusiasm, that's a better word.
Like I feel like you're enthusiastic, and then it's like, oh, like we can be enthusiastic about our lives, people. And
enthusiasm is a good one.
You know,
for me,
and if not, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, so true. Yeah. That's a really good point. I think I thought that I had to like table the enthusiasm a little bit in order. I was like, well, if I have to be soft, I can't be as enthusiastic. But then like I had another like relationship that pointed out to me how much I loved that enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. I realized that what I was getting from that person was this level of enthusiasm, and I was like, why do I love this so much? Because that's the love that I give to people. It's this like enthusiastic, like, I believe in you. And you're more like, I believe in you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I believe in you. And you're just like, like, but I love it because I feel like I don't like, we just appreciate like each other's, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
And we could also like, sometimes you are though like super gentle and soft. And
if the situation warrants it. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes
and I can be fiery.
Like, sometimes I'll... It's like funny to me. I forget the like that I come across as gentle and soft because in my head I'm always like.
Well, you saying that I come across as grounded, I don't think of myself as grounded. I think of myself as being like floating away.
Yeah, so perception's so funny. Yeah. Because when you explain things to me, like you can explain things to me that might be in the realm of floating away, but when you explain them, it is like on Earth. Like we are on a solid rock, and here's the information being conveyed from this like galactic rock, and it like comes through like it's like, oh, I can follow this. Like it comes through very grounded. Like even though like you were talking about the eclipse today, and it was just so grounded and straightforward. Like there was nothing like floaty away about it. You know, it's like, oh, like the internet seemed to be like floating away into oblivion about the eclipse, and then having you encircled, just like being like, just observe. Like, oh, like I felt like when you find like a crystal that just like melts away all the like anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, just all we gotta do is observe. We don't have to do anything. We get to just observe at this time, and apparently record a podcast.
Yep.
That,
Long time coming.
That we'll watch in 9 years.
To the day.
And then 18 years.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this, like, sharing our observations about each other, because that's not something that we ever talk about. So it's like fun. It's fun to hear, especially with you, because like I respect your not discernment, but like I trust your perception. Cool. More than I trust a lot of people's perceptions, you know? So there's a lot of people that if they were telling me what they think of me, I'd be like, okay, well, I don't know. That's where my judgment might come in, my conceptualizing of, I would think about the way that they see the world. Well, do I trust the way that they see the world? Okay.
That's not judgment. That's discernment, because in order to think about the way they see the world, requires understanding. Like you understand them enough to consider how they see the world, and if you're understanding, you're not judging, you're just discerning.
So back to the prompt that we did earlier today, I think my word is discernment. Yeah. That is my natural.
And that's
what was the prompt? Can we say
it? It was so we had our default tendencies.
That's right.
When you're so, like, typically, you see the world through, like,
so I think eyes. Mine is discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, my highest expression remains the same, is nuance.
Yeah.
Is keeping that nuance active and alive in the discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps it away from judgment. Like,
yeah.
If the nuance is alive, because judgment's black and white. Yeah. There's no gray. There's no nuance. It's either good or bad, right or wrong.
I think the judgment comes in when I'm in level 1 or 2.
Yeah.
That's where that comes in.
That's where
sure.
Judgment lives.
It's not like my default, but also like sometimes, more nuance, like the words aren't always there to describe exactly what we're trying to say in the moment.
Yep. Even now, like, I'm like, oh wait. Now I'm going back, my default is idealistic. That is how I see them. It's been my default. And rose-colored glasses. And because as you're speaking about discernment, I'm reflecting on, like, how much I've lacked discernment just throughout my life. And I've trusted. And it was because of the way I see the world. Because I think everybody's trustworthy and give my heart out freely and my service, and so it is idealistic and like rose-colored glasses, and it's got me into trouble. So that is my default. Discernment keeps you out of trouble. Maybe a little too much sometimes. Trouble is the spice of life. Get into trouble.
There was one thing that I want to circle back to, which is, I don't know, maybe we already did, when you were talking about the types of situations with friends, the types of dynamics that we might feel that we're done with. And I wanted to touch on something we were talking about earlier, which is that it doesn't always have to be something that's toxic. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be something like drinking. It doesn't always have to be someone who treats you poorly. Sometimes energy can just be stagnant, and even though the love is still there, sometimes we still need to make space for an even higher expression. And I think that, and we were talking about this, is how much more challenging that is. Because when you have nothing to lose, it's like, if what I'm losing are friends who don't treat me well, at that point I have nothing to lose. That's easy. Right. Like, let it go. But what about when it's people that we love so very much, people that have literally gotten us to where we are today, who not who, it's nothing about them. That's where it's not personal, it's just vibrational, is when we're ready to go to the next step, but the people that we've gotten to this step with aren't ready to move with us.
Yeah. Yep. And it could be something, it could be like so subtle. Like I notice when, like for example, you know, friendships, like we all communicate through texts and stuff. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a brace for impact, adrenaline fueled communication. It could simply be like, you know, just like, oh, I'm not excited to read that.
Yeah.
Not enthusiastic.
Yeah.
You know, and not having the enthusiasm received. Like, the energy is either, you know, cranking up or falling flat.
Yeah.
And when it falls flat, that could be enough. Like, it could be hard to recognize that because it is, like, could still be treated perfectly well.
Yeah.
But it can be so subtle. And it's like, well, I'm in the process of cranking up. So
how do we create space in those situations in a way that's loving to everyone involved?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different for everybody, but what comes up for me whenever I ask myself that question is just lead by example. Like, that's always the answer that comes through, and just, like, stay focused on my creative passions. And if people want to join me, they'll join me. If they don't, at least I'm getting where I was always meant to go. And then, like, in my heart, I just trust that the people who love me are cheering for me.
Yeah.
And if it's a, like, journey of solitude, that's okay.
Yeah. Have you ever been confronted with a question about space in that sort of case before?
I don't know. Like, what would that sound like?
Like, maybe, hey, I've noticed some distance between us. I really miss you. What's going on?
Not quite like that.
Okay.
But there's definitely been like if it were like that, I would be all for responding and engaging. But it's been more like not direct. Like if the communication is not direct, and like you're not like saying what you mean and meaning what you say, if there's guessing involved, if I have to interpret, try to guess what you're saying, try to translate what you're saying. Like there's been like communications that have been like, I won't say them because it'll reveal, it'll be obvious if any of these people are listening, but it's like dancing around it.
Yeah.
Reach outs and it's like, honestly, like something that does scare me about being a Pisces is like when I withdraw from someone's life, like it seems like when I do it, it's like, oh, like that's it, and my rose-colored glasses for that person fell off, and I'll just like, and I'm just kind of done, and it like, and then what becomes revealed is like, oh, like maybe the connection was real at the time, but is gone now, so there's no point in trying to like force staying in each other's lives.
Yeah. And
sometimes it scares me because it can look, because it's also so internal, and to me it doesn't need to be communicated. But it could also, I know from like the outside, it looks like I just like dropped someone like that. And it does like kind of scare me that like I like can do that.
Why does that scare you?
Because it doesn't seem like other people do it. It seems like other people like maintain a relationship.
I need things to be communicated. It doesn't mean I'm going to maintain the relationship, but I do need the communication.
Yeah.
Or I perceive a need for the communication. Whether I actually need it or not is another question, but...
Yeah. Like, I feel like that's more normal. Or like
what is
more
normal?
acceptable, right?
Yeah,
I feel like that's more acceptable.
Okay.
In like friendships and like relationships. I feel like they're like communication needs to happen. And then, and like if I internally, I think for me what it is I don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Can I bring up something about the Virgo risings in us as well? Is that I don't think everyone analyzes to the same level either. So some people might need the communication because they haven't been analyzing it all along the way that you may have been.
Okay, yes. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
You're aware of what's happening because you've been observing and discerning and making note of exactly what's happened, putting it in a mental chart in your mind, and it's clean and it's easy to understand. Why would I need to communicate that? I don't think everyone does that.
Thank you.
Because this is something that I've realized is because I'm always doing that. But then when I lay things out, people are like, oh, that makes so much sense. I'm like, what do you mean? You weren't doing that in your mind the whole time?
Wow. I want that shared in the, that's the perfect, I'm like, that's exactly it. It's this continuous analytical report kind of experiential data that I'm always tracking, always keeping, and then maybe, I don't know if it's the Virgo or the Pisces that's keeping a record, but everything's in there and it's tracked and quantified.
I think that's the Virgo. I'm pretty sure your Pisces is like, wait, what happened?
My Pisces is
the Pisces is on the side that's
flowers.
Wait, I wasn't even here on Earth.
Yeah. And then it's okay, I can make my conclusion now, it's a thesis paper, and the conclusion is incompatible.
Yeah.
And once I discern that there's incompatibility, I'm just all right. I don't know how to. Maybe it's I just don't know how to communicate it in a way that doesn't make other people feel bad. But I don't know, maybe it makes them feel worse that I just peace. But I'm also but don't they feel it too? I assume that they feel the incompatibility too. That it's just not vibing. Aren't we both trying to force something? And the vibe is gone? There's no connection point? I don't other people, because I can feel it. Don't you feel it? So sometimes when I've gotten those communications that they been more direct, I've noticed you dropped off, can we talk about this? I would so be down to have a conversation. They just haven't been like that. They've been kind of it's they're poking me or testing out the waters or something, and I'm just
I feel the dating culture of today promotes that kind of behavior. Okay. Don't you think though, we're taught I feel I don't know if it's also maybe, so we're a few years apart.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's that I grew up in the dating age of online dating.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if this is when I say online dating, I don't mean online dating, I mean apps.
Yeah.
Right? Which is kind of recent, but apps became huge with dating when I was around 17, 18. So that's pretty much that age. And I feel it's taught that when we're it's don't communicate directly because that's scary. That kind of thing.
Whew, yeah.
And I feel that has infiltrated into other types of relationships. This sort of collective, we're just gonna, I don't even know.
Dance around
everything.
Try to get a feel, I could see that. I've never,
I don't know, I'm just making a guess based on
Yeah.
But I feel that's where I've noticed that the most. And I also feel because with dating, I will also be very direct. And I feel some people are wow, this is refreshing. And some people are what are you doing? This is so confronting.
Yeah. I appreciate direct, and if somebody thought it was confronting, it's all right, that vetted that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
How else are we gonna get to the root?
I agree. I'm just hypothesizing as to why other people might not be so direct. I don't know.
And when it happens, honestly, when It's like, I'm not gonna, like, go fishing here to try to figure out what you're trying to say. If I look at the phone and go, like, and I feel tired because there's a lack of direct communication, and I gotta, like, try to, like, yeah, I'm just not gonna engage.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when that's happened, people don't really come back into my life.
I really see that as a strength. I don't find it so easy to, like, when I feel the energy is stagnant, it has to be, like, a very conscious, like, a very conscious recognition and a very conscious decision to be like, okay, this is what I'm noticing right now, and making a decision about what I'm going to do about that. And I don't always know how to handle it, because even though when I do find myself in those really direct conversations, I find that I'm able to say things in a way, like, sometimes I feel like I'm being harsh, and then I'll be like, I'm sorry if that was harsh, and people are like, no, that was so nice, like,
that's amazing.
But, like, but for me to actually get in those conversations, though, is like, I have to play a game with myself. It's like a dance with myself. I'm like, oh, but I don't want to hurt their feelings. Oh, but what if they start meeting my needs, which is a whole other, there's some trauma stuff in that. But yeah.
And that, like, I find that admirable to, like, have those conversations and be able to be direct. I'll have them in the shower. and it is not nice. Like,
so with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be in the shower having imaginary conversations, and that's where I'm like, and another thing like this. But it's where, like, usually is what's happening is I'm listing all the red flags, and in my imagination it's to the other person, and I don't want to do that. So, but then it also just, like, gets out of my system, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then it's out of my system, and then I'm like, well, that's that. And then I'm not gonna, like, tell them, like, oh, all your red flags popped out, because then they're gonna be like, what are they? And I'm like, and then I guess I could just be like, that's not my responsibility.
I knew you were gonna say that. That's what popped into my head. That's not my responsibility.
Not my responsibility. I have my own nervous system, my own fascia, my own experience of healing, and my body remembers. And so when the red flags pop out and I just want to go in a different direction, that's my only responsibility. My responsibility is to my nervous system. If you're not healthy for my nervous system, I don't know. I just don't see much need to communicate.
I love it.
I just swim. It's like Chris and I joke about this all the time, because we both, like, when we get instincts to swim in the opposite direction, we just, like, take off. And we're like, oh, we're doing the Pisces thing. Like, we could swim so hard in one direction, and then something will, it's like the tide will shift, or the current will shift, and we'll just swim in the opposite direction. And it's like, it seems like it might, from the external, it might seem like a drastic shift, but to us, it's normal. It was like, oh, it just did, like, the Pisces swimmeroos that way now.
Yeah. Well, I love the self-conviction, or the, I don't know if that's the right word, but, like, that's, like, a level of self-protection, honoring yourself, that I find really challenging. So, like, I'm like, that sounds great.
I will say, if it's someone who's really important to me, like, if it's, like, someone in my family, you, Chris, like, anyone in the Coven, like, if it was someone really important to me, like, really deep in my heart, and I felt like like something was shifting, and like I mean I've had those conversations with my family over and over and over. So like if it's important to me, and I feel like it's important, I feel like the importance is reciprocated.
Yeah.
I'll have those conversations. If I feel like the importance is not reciprocated, and it could just be my own interpretations, then I'll be like, all right, fine. I'm not important to you. You're not important to me. And get my attitude.
Hell yeah. We are not proving our importance to anyone.
Yeah.
Except to ourselves.
And again, it could just be interpretations of someone else's. Like, we're all just interpreting.
Yeah.
It's like how music's music because of the space between the notes. It's like...
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, if you're just like... Bam, that would not be music. But
Wow.
if you like, you know... Bam, 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 bam. Those spaces.
Yeah.
And that's my song. But it's like... Same with humans. Like, we have this song, and there's spaces in between our communication. There's gaps in communication, and we fill it in.
Mm-hmm.
And however we fill it in, there's a lot to discover in how we fill it in about ourselves. Like, we can learn about each other through communication with each other, and then those gaps in the song, that's our space to learn about ourselves.
Mm.
So if there's a gap in communication, and I make the interpretation like, oh, that I'm not important enough to that person to reach out, like, well, and like confront this situation, fine. And, you know, they're not important to me. Well, maybe they're making the same interpretation. Maybe they think it's my responsibility to reach out and confront the situation. And that's for me to, like, realize about myself. Like, I'm interpreting that, and then realizing, like, actually, I mean, sometimes I like eventually arrive at, like, I don't miss the relationship.
Yeah.
And then that's a little sad. And then there's a mourning. Also, going back to our theme of release, like when we release friends, like grief is there, mourning is there. There's a mourning period, and we're welcome to embrace that, because it does show how deep it was and how much we truly cared and truly loved.
Yeah.
And if we resist that grief, yeah, I don't recommend resisting it.
Well, resisting the grief is a space holder.
Yeah.
So that space is not there to welcome in the new things.
Right.
Anything you're resisting is holding a certain amount of weight and space in your experience, for sure.
Yeah, it'll keep you there.
Yeah. It'll keep you there.
What we resist persists. So if you're resisting it, you're still attached to it.
Yeah, very true.
And then, yeah.
And that also brings me back to the aspect that, like, if you're not mourning it, then it was one of those things that was really easy to release, because the biggest practice is not in releasing what's toxic. The biggest practice and act of self-love is releasing what's not toxic, but just stagnant.
Yeah. Oh, it's like the number of, like, I've had a few relationships, and I've also had friends who've had a few relationships where, like, we've been like, you know, he's a good guy, like, my family likes him, he treats me well, but like, you know, there's just something off, and it's so hard because all those things, like, he's a good guy, you know.
When there's really no reason.
Yeah, it's like, he didn't do anything wrong, he doesn't yell at me, like, and it's just like the energy's just off, like, I don't, like, it just doesn't feel like how I want it to feel.
Yeah. That's like, me and Ariana always sing to the tune of if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. We always sing, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
whenever these situations come up, we're
Yeah.
like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Yeah, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Like, if it's not a hell yes, like, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough. We don't have to convince ourselves to stay. Like, whether it's not just in a relationship or friendship, but like work.
Yeah.
Like, we use so much level 3 energy, for everybody who's been following along with energy leadership, but level 3 energy to convince ourselves, like, it's the energy of rationalizing, justifying, tolerating. We use so much of that energy to convince ourselves to stay in any situation that, like, deep down, and we think, like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat because that keeps the external peace. Like peace, like P-E-A-C-E.
Yeah.
Not peace, like piece of a
Gotcha.
cracker. Yeah.
Keeping the peace.
Yeah, keeping the peace, like, externally. But when we're doing that, we're creating an internal battle, and it could, like, eat away at us.
Mm.
And then sisterhood circles, community circles can help bring that out and help us admit when we're doing that.
Yeah. For sure.
Back to circle.
Yeah. Isn't it nice to have people in our life that, like, I've said this to you before, I want to be called out. Like, if I'm doing something, like, I love having people in my life that will be like, this is what you're doing right now. And, like, sometimes there might be resistance to hearing it, right? Like, one of the people that helped me the most in calling me out was someone that I was constantly triggered by their constant calling me out. And when I left that, it was a romantic relationship. When I left that relationship, like, I was so much better for it. And I did need to leave it because the way in which they were calling it out was not the most loving possible way.
Yeah.
However, I needed all that stuff to be called out because as soon as I left that container, and the reason that I needed, like, I think that healing could have happened within the container of that relationship had it been a safe space. The reason it wasn't a safe space is because the way in which the person was going about it wasn't the most loving possible way. But as soon as I left that relationship, that's when, first of all, it opened up the space for me to meet the Coven. But I was having those, I have spoken about this so many times, like the little epiphanies. There was a period of like weeks where multiple times every day, it would be like this little like firework in my brain where
I like that.
Everything just cleared. And it's like, everyone has heard me use the analogy of the necklace chain, the really small chain that gets tangled and you don't know at which part to pull at because it's so tangled that you don't, like, if you pull one part of the chain, it's going to get tighter. But there's like those little parts that you can pull where it gets looser. And I always would talk about the way that my brain was at that time was like the necklace chain where I didn't know what part to pull at.
Yeah.
Because some things that you pull would make it tighter and some things that, like, I knew there was something that would loosen it up, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And like when I was having in that period, that few weeks where I was having all these little firework epiphanies, it was like all of a sudden just the right strands of the chain were being pulled and it got released. And it was like everything, it would be like in one moment, my entire life shifted because that one understanding would open up like so many other things. Like, it, you know, every concept can be applied to everything else.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
so true.
Yeah. So it's like everything would be blown open and I'm like, whoa. And then like 3 hours later it happened again and I'm like, whoa. Like, and then, but like basically all of that created the space for me to then find the Coven. Because once that happened, I was able to listen to my intuition. My intuition told me to go to California. My intuition told me to go to the Crystal Dig. Emmy and I were staying, she was staying in LA and I was staying in San Diego. And we just both drove out to the mountains, and that's where we met. And just like, yeah. And even the way that I feel like I've probably told this, but it's probably helpful to share. The way that I ended up connecting with the Coven. So I first connected with Emmy at a crystal dig in California. So it was the very beginning of COVID. And Emmy posted on her story. I had just started making candles. Emmy posted candle molds on her story. She had been using them for resin. But on her story, she wrote, they were too cloudy to use for resin. Does anyone want these? They're best used for candles at this point, basically. And I had just started making candles. They were shaped like pyramids. I was like, yeah. And then I went to Emmy's house to pick them up. This is the very first days of COVID. I show up. We're both wearing these like knee-length like tie-dye hoodies, like giant hoodies and leggings. And we're standing 6 feet apart because this is the very first days, and we had no idea what was going on in the world at that point. So weird. And I said, I don't know what's happening right now. No one knew what was happening right then, but I was like, I don't know what's happening right now, but I know it's for the best, for humanity. And she was like, do you want to come on a Zoom call with my Coven? And literally, I think my jaw dropped. I was like,
it's like,
yes!
That's the code phrase for our Coven. I don't know what's happening, but I know it's for the best. Like, well, guess what?
She was like, oh, one of my witches? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Not.
I didn't know that part of the story.
Oh,
that
yeah.
You said that. Like, I knew about
that. That was like, literally, I said that sentence, and immediately she asked if I wanted to come on the Zoom call. And then she texted me the Zoom link, and we had, like, the little graphic. I think it was a graphic. It was, like, a picture of... Remember Emmy used to make those, like, graphics for all of our gatherings? Yes. It was a picture of witches. I think it was, like, 3 witches with their...
Yeah.
And it had the Zoom link, and it said... high noon on Zoom or something, and it had like the number to get into the Zoom thing. It said, what did we do? It's Sundays. There was like 3 days a week at that point. Yeah.
We spent hours on our calls.
Oh, the luxury to be encircled 12 hours a week.
Yeah. And it felt like the most important thing in the world.
It was.
It felt like
the most important thing in the world.
Yeah. Like,
I was living with my mom at the time, and I remember getting off of those calls and running downstairs, and I'd be like on a high. I was like, and I remember my mom looking at me, and she was so happy, like, just to see me like that. I don't think she had ever seen me like that. You know, like, I mean, as a kid, having my passions shut down all the time, because I was always very enthusiastic as well. And that level of enthusiasm is not well received by people who are deep with their trauma, you know? And like seeing me like that has opened up my mom's world in a lot of ways. Like, she has later on, in somewhat rare moments, fleeting moments sometimes, but reflected back to me how those shifts in me have sparked something in her as well.
How did I feel to hear that?
Oh, it's amazing.
That's like, I feel like that's what we all want to hear from our parents.
Both of my parents have spoken to my healing journey and sparking theirs as well. With my mom, though, there was a lot of, like, it wasn't always easeful with neither of them, but, like, with my mom, there was a lot of yelling on my part, like, being like, do you see what you did?
Yeah.
But she has done a lot of healing.
Vindicated.
Yeah. I will not keep my mouth shut anymore. Oh my goodness. So good.
Shoot, there's something I wanted to ask you. Man, think about moms. It's like, set me on another fractal line.
We'll have that conversation on the podcast someday.
Yeah. Now it's just an Emmy love fest.
Yeah,
Emmy,
we love you, Emmy.
We love you. Will you make our graphics again? Yeah.
Do we have anything else to add on our original topic, which is creating space for...
Now what's coming to mind is like tips. Like, are there tips we could offer, or like how to like keep the faith that your tribe is out there, how to not get, or like how even just how to recognize your vibe so that you can attract your tribe.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is just, it's very in alignment with what we were talking about with the eclipse, but like, you just have to trust. I mean, this is one of those things that like, you won't, like, you're not going to see it until it's there. If you don't have an example of it, you really just have to trust.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I had no friends for a period of time, which we were both in that boat. But like, when I first distanced myself from my trauma friends, I was like, I'd rather be alone than be surrounded by these people.
Yep.
And just...
Yep. And that might be like the first step, like recognizing what you don't want to be around. Like, for me, it started with recognizing I don't want to be around gossip anymore. And it was, I remember when I had that thought and I was standing with a group of coworkers at Elephant and Castle
I remember that place.
And it was right downstairs from where I worked. And so we'd go there pretty often. And I remember standing there were a group of coworkers, and one was like yelling in my face about another one, and the other one was like right behind her, and she was like airing out this girl's dirty laundry. And I try to shift the focus to me to get it off of her, because I felt for her. She was my friend, and they're both my friends, but they did not get along, and it was just so much gossip. And I realized that and it may have been that generation of women. It was actually one of the female partners. I hope she never sees this. But one of the female partners at the firm, there were only 5 of them at the time. Out of 78 partners, only 5 were female. And in my idealistic vision, they would be like a unit, like a strong unit. But they all gossiped about each other and threw each other under the bus first chance they get. Like, they'd corner me in the bathroom and talk about each other. And finally, I just kept getting to the point where I was able to set boundaries. Just working with my coach and realizing, like, it brings me down. And then I go home and I'm exhausted, and I just eat and watch TV because I'm so exhausted, not from work, but from the gossip and the politics and narratives. And everybody wants you to take up like their agenda. Like, everybody has this agenda, and it seemed to include like putting another person down, and they'd be like, take up my cause, and the way they get your buy-in is by gossiping, and I was just like, then I was just seeing these patterns everywhere. So that was like my first step, was recognizing, like, okay, I know I don't want that. Like, I don't want that in my life. I don't want the gossip. I don't want other people to put themselves up by putting others down. Like, that hurts. It just hurts. And so recognizing that, like, I can't be a part of this anymore. And then, of course, like, other things, like just the levels of like drug use and alcohol abuse, and just recognize like it's not for me, and know like there's other stuff out there. So like, the first, and recognizing like what's in there, what's really in there, in my opinion, is the desire to connect.
Yeah,
so like even when
desire to connect.
Yeah, like even when we're gossiping, even when we're drinking ourselves into oblivion, we're like, in my opinion, we're trying desperately to connect, and we don't have the tools to actually connect. We've never really been taught how to, without those like gimmicks.
Okay, so step 1, recognizing what is no longer working for us,
what you don't want.
No matter how subtle it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just, it doesn't feel right, and that's enough.
Yeah, and that's enough. And then maybe step 2 is recognizing, like, tune into your core values. Like, where are your core values showing up? And where are they being dimmed or violated? And also desire feelings. Like, how do you desire to feel?
How do you want to feel? Yes. Okay. The visualization is a great one because right before I met the Coven, literally days, it was an eclipse, by the way, an eclipse on my birthday. And I did a candle ceremony. I lit a candle and I wrote down exactly what I wanted to feel. And I didn't know anything about anything at this point. I just did that intuitively and it worked. And so I visualized exactly what I wanted in friendships. I wrote the types of friendships that I wanted and I let the candle burn all the way through. It finally burnt out like an hour before we were supposed to leave that hotel. Or actually, I might have brought it with me like on its last leg to the car and then it burnt out. Like it was at its bottom. But so that's a good one. What do we want? Visualize what we want. Sorry, that was step 3. That wasn't as concise, but step 3, what do you want to feel?
It's so good though to feel it and like bring it into your body, into your heart. Like I used to do that. So your enthusiasm to me is so attractive because years ago, this was actually the relationship that resulted in my hiring my coach in my first place. I was with someone who anytime I express enthusiasm, he would shame me and like try to dim me. He was embarrassed by my enthusiasm and he'd be like,
I've experienced that.
Yeah. And he'd be like, okay, like and just like try to like turn my dial down. And I actually got put on meds during that relationship. I got put on antidepressants and he liked it because I was like within a boundaries of emotion that he was comfortable with. And then when I got out of that, off those meds and was tuning back into myself and when I started meditating on what I wanted, like once I was healed enough to be like, okay, I'm ready for, I went on like a 3-year healing journey working with my coach, staying single. And then one day I woke up and I was like, all right, I'm ready to attract a partner again. And I remember I was like in the steam room at the gym and I was like thinking about enthusiasm. And I was like, I want to attract a partner who loves enthusiasm, who is enthusiastic and expresses enthusiastically. I wasn't specific enough because what I attracted was not, I thought it was enthusiasm, but it was grandiosity. And I now know those are 2 very different ways of presenting oneself. And like kind of like over the top. He was like over the top and overbearing. And at first I thought it was enthusiasm. But I do remember like sitting in the steam room and imagining it and imagining like that feeling like, oh, I love enthusiasm. Like I love spontaneity. So just getting like really clear and on your core values because I can tell you for me, getting really clear on like well-being, health and wellness or core values of mine led me toward eventually yoga, not at first, but I was going to the gym. It was kind of a solo thing. And then, it was a cyclical journey of mind, body, spirit wellness, and spiritual wellness became such a core value, and that's what led me to the Coven. And then continuing on with yoga, and that led me to the yoga studio today, Mati. Could have never imagined that, but recognize like these are my core values and mind, body, spirit, just gonna tend to these. And previous relationships, previous group of friends were not doing those things. So, and it's okay to do it solo. Like Chris talks about his path as a man practicing yoga. Like yoga was his path and he was alone in it for a while.
Yeah.
And then other men started doing it too. And
so be be content with the solitude.
Yeah.
As part of it, for sure.
Embrace the solitude.
Embrace the solitude, yeah.
Yeah. And truly, because then once you do attract your tribe, your solitude is not as often. And so, like,
true.
You know,
that's
like,
where I am with romantic relationships right now. I'm like, actually, I don't think I want that.
Yeah.
I love my solitude. This is my peace.
Yes.
This is
solitude is gold.
And that when I do call that in, that'll be a new layer of of work that I have to do. And I'm like, wait, I just want to enjoy where I am now first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good part of it.
Yeah.
What step was that?
All right, so we've got recognize what you don't want, recognize how you do want to feel and your core values.
Okay.
Embrace the solitude on the way there.
Yes. I feel like that's a part of like the core values.
Yeah.
So then I want to say the next step is really, really honoring and trusting yourself. And this might also just be part of one of the other steps. These aren't exactly linear steps the way that we would put them together if we were like sitting down and doing this, but this is how they're flowing out right now. So really, really, really honoring yourself and not giving in to things that are not quite right. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That's my tip there.
Yes.
If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Keep that in mind.
And when you are really clear on your core values and how you desire to feel, and then you start setting boundaries to... Yeah, boundaries. Learn how to set boundaries and make them about just your core values and how you feel. They don't ever have to be about another person. They can simply be, my core value right now is integrity, so I can't work here anymore. Or that was actually not the best example because it definitely made it about the company. But, like, I'm on this journey right now. I remember eventually what I ended up saying to my boss, because at first I made it about him. I made it about the company. I had met my dragon and I was like lighting the whole place on fire for a minute there, and then he and I were going back and forth, and then I finally was like, then I felt bad about what I said to him, and I eventually was like, it's not really about you. I'm just being called elsewhere, and I kind of wish I just said that from the beginning, but it's okay.
Sometimes less words is more.
Yeah. You could just say like, I'm honoring my intuition these days, and I'm just being called in this direction. It could be as simple as that.
And you don't always even need to say anything.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of not saying anything. I'm a big fan of either like raging and setting some place on fire, or just going cold as ice. But that's me. Everybody's journey is different. And so, yeah, when you can set those boundaries, like when you get so clear on your core values and what's like relevant to you at the time, and also what helps your nervous system to heal and recalibrate, no one can tell you who you are or who you're not. And recognizing that, and then your intuition starts getting stronger and stronger. Yeah.
I was gonna go to the next thing. Yeah. So do you have? Okay.
No, I'm thinking the next thing.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was gonna say is showing up authentically. Mm-hmm. Just be who you are, so that your people can recognize you.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like that's the last step. Or the last step is like when they do recognize you is having the self-confidence to follow through.
Yeah.
And then you have your peeps.
And give thanks and like gratitude for like anytime what you've been praying for and envisioning shows up, like give it up to the universe for I
feel like that part comes so naturally though, because when you call in these things, like, I mean, I always end up in this like bliss state, and then everything is just gratitude.
Yeah.
Like, gratitude is all there is at that point.
Yeah. Something that my mentor told me, Mackenzie, she said, she's been saying this for years, just when you recognize those moments, say, how does it get better than this?
Oh, yeah, I've heard you say that.
Yeah, because it's a way of showing the universe, I dig it, thank you, and I'll
There's
take more.
also space for more.
Yeah, I'll take more of this.
How does it get better than this?
How does it get better than this? Oh, Trixie.
Should we wrap up with that?
Yeah. How does it get better than this?
How does it, Trixie?
We tried our tribe, Black Cats.
Yeah.
We both attracted black.
Thank you for watching the Black Cat Podcast. Okay.
Okay, yep, we're going off the rails.
Thank you for watching the Coven Loven Podcast. We can't wait to see you calling everything that you desire.
Yeah. And we can't wait to sit in a circle with you.
Yeah!
It's not personal, it's vibrational.